Hi everyone, I made a few political videos about the Israeli-Arab conflict, 10 things you didn't know about the conflict, when will there be real peace, and a couple of others, and each of these videos generated a lot of comments. As you would expect, some people didn't like what I said. Now, I can't answer all the thousands of comments that I got, but I thought I would at least respond to some of the smart anti-Israel comments. Before I start, just a quick word about the not so smart comments I get, and there are plenty of them. To call what I say propaganda or to say I am biased or a Zionist is not a good argument. In fact, it is not an argument at all. Yes, I am a Zionist, a proud Zionist, but if I say that most Muslim countries are dictatorships without freedom of speech, or that the Jews said yes to the partition plan and the Arabs said no and started a war, you can say that I'm wrong, which I'm not. You can say that what I'm saying is not important or not relevant, but to call me names just because you don't like what I say, you can do better than that. The second thing is rather alarming. I grew up in a left-leaning environment. In Israel, that means not orthodox, pro-human rights and women's rights. And I was taught that racism is a disease of the far right. 99% of comments regarding my skin color, hair color, eye color, and other irrelevant parameters came from the left. You want to call it political identity? Sure, I will call it what it is, racism. If you want to disagree with what I say, let's have a debate. Don't bring up my skin color or my good looks. I will start with a general comment by Alexander. I'm sure this will be blocked, but I can't help but notice the censorship happening in this comment section, scrolling down far and never past a single negative comment. This does not give me a good feeling about how honest you were when you asked for others to point out errors in your claims. Thanks for the comment. I don't delete comments and I don't apply any of the filters that YouTube provides creators with. Some comments, negative and positive, disappear. I honestly don't know why. YouTube removes the dislike button as well, which I find ridiculous. I can see it in the back end, and I will tell you the truth. I have way too many likes for my political videos, and I don't like it. Now, don't get me wrong, I like likes and do give this video a like, but if a political video gets 90% likes, it means that the people who are watching it already agree with me. Sadly, YouTube isn't showing the video to enough people who will disagree with me. I want to see more negative comments. That way I know that I've got through to the other side. One theme that comes up again and again is that I am, or Israel is, a European colonialist project. Nick Fish wrote, "Let's keep it simple, a people from the first world, North Europe, savvy and well organized." Sparkle wrote, "It is not an Arab-Israeli conflict, it is a Palestinian-Israeli occupation issue, European supremacist colonial occupation of the land of the indigenous inhabitants." Five comments, "Israel is a colonial project whose goal is to rid the Europeans of the Jews at the expense of the Palestinians." And there are many more comments of that sort. Now, let's get all the hot air out of this particular balloon. First, most Israelis are Jews who ran away from Arab countries, not from Europe. And second, Jews from all over the world have always come to Israel, from Turkey, Algeria, and Iraq. The first wave of Jews from Europe came in 1882. A few months earlier, a group of Jews came from Yemen, and they settled in Jerusalem, just outside the old city walls. Soon I will be telling you what happened to their village. But it is important for you to know that Jews from all over the world have always come to Jerusalem and to the land of Israel. Yes, in the late 19th century, the waves became bigger because there were better means of transportation, and Jews were being persecuted in Russia. But Jews have always been coming to Israel. There is an important thing to understand. When Arabs stand in Hebron to pray, they turn their back to Jerusalem and face Mecca, while Jews always pray towards Jerusalem. Jews never turn their back on Jerusalem. Next comment, your knobs start with, "So at the beginning of the video you claim you aren't a far rightist. That is clearly the first lie of the video, as you are very obvious a Jewish supremacist. which is far-right ideology. I am for democracy, I'm for women's rights, I'm for gay rights, I'm for free speech. Does that make me far-right? Or am I far-right only if I mention that Muslim society lacks all of these values? Jorg, please enlighten me on this one. Double E continues with this train of thoughts and writes, I dislike and am saddened by the way that you frame Muslim culture. You frame them as unjust, cruel, violent, backwards, and simply fringe. You also did not mention, not even once, the human rights violation. I will avoid the term genocide because then you will ignore everything I have to say that Israel is imposing on Palestinians, or in your words, Arabs. Thank you, Double E. This is a perfect example of many things that are wrong with those who criticize Israel. You and people like yourself blame Israel for the worst crimes in modern history, like genocide, ethnic cleansing, apartheid. If we are carrying out a genocide, how come the number of Arabs is growing? But it saddens you when I say that Muslim society is more violent. If almost all Muslim countries are dictatorship, it means that they are more violent. If it is illegal to be gay in all Muslim society, if all minorities in Muslim countries are shrinking and disappearing, it means that they are more violent. If there is no freedom of speech, whether among the rich, the poor, the Sunni, the Shia, and the Muslim countries in North Africa and in Asia, it means that Muslim society is more violent. If the Arab Spring didn't bring democracy but mostly wars and chaos, it means that it is a more violent society. If in Europe there is more violence in Muslim neighborhoods from Sweden to the UK, it means that it is a more violent society. And it is not the fault of Israel, the Jews, the West, or colonialism. The blame lies with the Muslim society and its values. If you don't agree with me, prove me wrong. Write to me, hey, I live in Paris or Manchester or Rotterdam, and here the Jewish neighborhoods are more violent than the Arab ones. Next comment from David. You make many points that I have no doubt are valid. Thank you. But you are painting a picture that Israel is totally innocent. That's untrue and you know it. Amnesty International state a long list of crimes that Israel commits today, such as torture, institutionalized discrimination, etc. I'm not against Israel or pro-Palestine, but the truth matters. Thank you, David, for your comment, and I have a few things to say. You are right, Israel is not totally innocent. When you have 19-year-old men and women in the military having to deal with terrorists within a civil population and you don't know who is going to pull out a knife or a gun, there is a lot of mental pressure. Mistake will be made and some soldiers will abuse their power. Combat is hell, and combat in densely populated area is even worse. There are always rotten apples, even in the finest batch. I will tell you something and you can choose whether to believe me or not. I was in Gaza, I served 3 years in the army and then 12 more years in the reserve army. All my friends and my family members served in the army, and I can tell you that the Israeli army makes a tremendous effort not to harm civilians. The thing is that Hamas and Hezbollah take advantage of that, so they shoot from schools, hospitals, and private homes. In Israel, we do whatever we can to protect civilians, whereas they use civilians as human shields. Now, maybe you have watched many hours of news about Israel and you know the Israeli army better than I do. That is a possibility. But here is a thought. Any Israeli soldier can enter an Arab village in Israel and start shooting. We take our machine guns home with us. It has happened only like 3 times in the history of Israel that an Israeli soldier opened fire on Arab civilians in order to kill as many Arabs as he could. Now, how many times have Muslim terrorists deliberately killed Israeli civilians? Thousands of times. And these terrorists are their heroes. The reason I don't speak about the ways in which Israel isn't perfect has to do with 2 things, and you've mentioned one of them: the media and human rights organization. Quick example. Do you know how many Syrians died in 2021 in the civil war that is going on there? You don't, because you probably haven't heard too much about it in the media. 3,700 people lost their lives in Syria last year, like 10 people every day, and the world is silent about it. About the same number of Palestinians died in conflict in the last decade. If there were 3,700 Palestinian casualties in a military operation, you would hear about it constantly 24/7, and Muslim and human rights organizations would demonstrate in every city in the Muslim and Western world. 500,000 Syrians have died in this war in this decade, but the sad truth is that if you can't blame Israel for the death of a Muslim, it is not interesting. In the video about things you don't know about the conflict, I gave many more examples. Millions have died in conflicts in Muslim countries, but you don't hear about them. The media, academia circles, and human rights organizations are absolutely obsessed with Israel. You will hear about the smallest thing that Israel does wrong. Now, you can say that you expect more from Israel as it is a democracy, but if you expect more from Israel, then it means you expect less from Muslim countries, and that makes you a racist. If a foreign reporter in Israel were to be honest, the next report from Israel would be, I'm now standing here with a helmet on my head, not far from the Gaza Strip, and talking as if I'm saying something important. But the truth is that an hour from now, I will be in Tel Aviv drinking a cold beer, enjoying great food, which is way too expensive, fast internet, and freedom of speech. If I was really brave, I would now be in Syria or Yemen, but I love my life, my wife, and my children, so I would rather stay here and hang out with hundreds of other foreign reporters that basically think like me. Back to you, Bill. And if international human rights organizations had any dignity, you would mostly be hearing about China, Russia, and the 50-plus Muslim dictatorships. Next comment, which is actually the end of your Knob's comment. You claim the Arabs started the war. That is so heavily simplified, it is essentially a lie. There were armed Jewish militias committing terrorist attacks for over a decade before Israel even became a state. P.S. I'm neither Muslim or Jewish, I'm a Swiss historian. The outside perspective is relevant to avoid bias. Fascism and apartheid is disgusting no matter where. I am, as I said, a proud Zionist. There are many things I'm proud of. Israel has achieved unbelievable things. One of the things I'm most proud of that I truly believe says something important about the society you live in is women's rights. Where it is good to be a woman, it is good to be a man. In 1903, the Zionist movement gave women the right to vote, one of the first nations in the world to do so. Your country, and as an historian, no, you don't need to be an historian to know this because it only happened yesterday. Women in Switzerland got the right to vote in 1971, and in some places only in 1989. Your comment is so wrong. The UN partition plan was put to the vote on the 29th of November 1947. The Jews said yes, and the Arabs started to attack Jewish civilians, killing 5 the next day. This is beyond dispute. And about the armed Jewish militias, people who are anti-Israel like to talk about rounds of violence that occurred before the establishment of Israel. No, it was pogroms against the Jews committed by Arabs. Muslims coming out of mosque waving their knives and screaming Itbach el Yahud. Have you ever seen Jews coming out of a synagogue after prayers waving knives and going off to kill someone? Never. The first Arab attack on a Jewish village was in 1886 in Petah Tikva. One Jewish woman was beaten to death. Then there were Arab pogroms against the Jews in 1920, 1921, 1929, and 1936 to 1939. Remember I told you about the Jews who came from Yemen to Jerusalem in 1882? Their village, Kfar HaShiloach, was plundered and destroyed by Arab gangs. The British promised the Jews that they would be able to go back to the village, but they didn't keep their promise. And one of the Jews went back to try to save the Torah scrolls and was shot to death. These militias, Haganah, Etzel, and Lehi, were created to protect the Jews. And it is only thanks to them we won the War of Independence. And here we are in prosperous Israel. That's it. I want to thank all my members and supporters on Ko-fi and Buy Me a Coffee who got to see this video first. You keep me going. In order to reach the people who will give this video a dislike, I need you to give this video a like, share it, and add a comment. There are many more negative comments I can respond to, so tell me if you want a sequel. See you in the next video. Yalla bye.